this computer. Thank you, James, for reminding me. So the recording is underway. And I'm now going to start my talk, which is about creating a new script. And we'll actually speak about several new scripts in this talk, bringing Tangsa languages into the Facebook era. And we're also going to actually talk about a little bit about the Wancho language as well when we come to something a little bit later on. So in this talk, I'm going to firstly say a little bit about the Tangsa varieties, not a lot, and give you an overview of the writing systems that have been used for Tangsa languages since time immemorial. That will be explained shortly. Then a brief, timely, up-to-date excursus about bringing the coronavirus message into multiple languages. And here, Craig Cornelius from the United States has been very helpful over the last couple of days. And also Banwang has translated this into Wancho, as you will see. And then finally, I will get to the main part of the talk, which is to describe as best I can the Tangsa script created by Mr. Lakhum Mossang. Okay, so the languages that we call Tangsa are known on the Myanmar side as Tangshang, and these two words, despite their appearances, are not cognate. Yes, my toolbar is covering the title of the slides. I'll try and get rid of it down to the bottom. Is that better? Okay, so these two words are not cognate, and the Tangsa/Tangshang groups on both sides of the India-Myanmar border consist of about 80 subtribes, and those subtribes, some of them speak varieties that are completely mutually intelligible. They understand everything. They are absolutely dialects and in fact are almost indistinguishable to outsiders, whereas others are completely unintelligible. Each group has its own name for itself and its own name for every other group. So for example, the group that call themselves Muishaung are known by a general name Mossang to others, but other groups call them other things. So for example, the Cholim call them Muishaung. The Cholim, their general name is Tonglum, and the Mossang call them Tulum. So you can see there's quite a lot of diversity in these languages. And I put together on this last slide, and I'm going to slip that thing up to the top for the moment, so hopefully you can see what's on this slide, which is an example of the same sentence, I cannot carry them, in 4 different Tangsa languages so that you can see the distinction. And these sentences are spelled out using orthographies that are to a lesser or greater extent actually in use by these different subtribes. So the Joglei would say something like nga hulji mak. The Cholim would say something like ni kulot mang. You can hide the taskbar under more. Thank you. Thank you, Caroline, for that. Excellent, that's much better. Except that means I won't, well, I don't know if you send me a message whether I'll see it or not. Never mind. The Cholim say ni kulot mang. The Lotang would say ni hui tai mau. And the Rira would say nga mi kun not lang. And these are 4 different ways of saying exactly the same thing. The words for I and carry are cognate with each other, but the words for able are all 4 completely different forms, and the grammatical structure that creates this is also different for each of these varieties. So this is the issue that we face, considerable diversity of these languages. Now, I thought I'd give you a brief history of writing in Tangsa/Tangshang. And this, I divided into 6 stages, not all of which are in chronological order. And they go back to time immemorial because they're right throughout this region, there are folk stories of an ancient form of writing done on the skins of animals that was lost when it was eaten by the ancestors. This story is told by people all over this eastern Himalayan region. I'm not sure how far it goes. And this story predates any attempts to introduce writing. So it has some kind of long-term aspect to it. Then, since the late 19th century, scholars, starting with the British official J.F. Needham, have been writing these languages down using the systems that they find they can work, most recently things that perhaps involve the IPA. You'll see examples shortly. Roman-based orthographies designed for use as a common language. So the idea here is that these are used not just by an individual subtribe, but by everyone or by many, often associated with church, and we'll talk a bit about them shortly. Then there are orthographies that just one subtribe is designed for its own use. I'll give you an example of that. Some more informal ones, and the thing about the informal ones is that they don't require to be fully phonemic. They don't mark all the tone distinctions. They are there simply to, in effect, remind people what to say, and we'll see an example of that. And finally, the non-Roman based scripts, and that's what we're going to hopefully talk quite a little bit about. So on the current slide, which is headed The Loss of Writing, I've made the point that while we know nothing about what this writing was like, we know this. Now you can very quickly read this story, but basically the creator distributed everyone their own language and a script to everyone. Some got it on paper, some on leaves, others on cloth, but the Heva Naga, they were the last, and Heva Naga, or Heva at least, is an indigenous term for this group of people, whereas Tangsa is a more recently coined one. They got it on animal skin and they got hungry one day and ate it, and therefore they have no writing. So I thought this was the most appropriate story to convert into 3 different scripts that are or could be in use for the Muishaung language. So on this slide, what you see is the whole of that story. On the left-hand side, the Roman-based orthography created by Rev Gam Win. I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. The script created by Lakhum Mossang, and what is known as the Tangsa Naga Unified Orthography, which some people on the Myanmar side are wanting to introduce for use by all the Tangsa groups. And here what we have is the same story in these 3 different systems. Now, none of these are able to be read really by anywhere near a majority of Muishaung Tangsa people, and they would be a real mystery to most other Tangsa speakers. But nevertheless, this is a move towards writing. Okay, so stage 2, which are the scripts created by others. Here's an example from Needham, 1897. And this example is, I'm just going to check there's no chat coming to me. Okay, some people can't join the meeting and I don't know why. And I don't know how to solve that. Now, how did I get rid of the show video panel? Hide. Right. So I'll just keep the chat available there in case someone needs to talk to me. So Needham's script, because I don't think any of you can see the script, can see the chat that's on my screen. So Needham's script was created in 1897. It doesn't mark tone, but it does tell us very interesting things about the state of the language, the Muishaung variety of Tangsa in 1897. That variety very different in some ways from the way it is today. And in particular, I will go, I will sell. Today, these are distinguished from each other, not just for the verb, but also the part that's marked will there, because that is different for the transitive verb sell and the intransitive verb go. And here's an example from a very recent piece of work. This is one of the stories recorded in the Muklom language by Mulder, an extract. And this is a linguist's effort to, okay, I'll try and get rid of the chat. But if someone sends me a chat message, I can't see that it's there at the moment. So this is an example of the Tangsa language, one of the Tangsa languages, Muklom, being written in the IPA script. Okay, so the second thing I very much here wanted to mention, this particular orthography created by Ngaimong people in Burma around about the 1970s, I believe, printed on very old brown paper, very few copies remaining. Some people from other Tangsa subtribes were very angry about this and prevented it from being turned into educational usage. But this was the fifth page, I think, or the fifth story in this. It's a story about a Gilgai, which is a goat. And the first line says, Gilgai ka ahuk palai. Gilgai means a goat. Ka is like that one. Ahuk, his legs or her legs, palai, four. Arung anai, his horns, two. And you see these colons and commas, these are tone marks. So this was developed a long time ago, but as I say, it was prevented by, I'm not quite sure who, and did not develop. On the India, that was on the Burma side. On the India side, Bible translation started in the mid-1970s, I believe. First, I think, in the Mungre variety, but then eventually the Reverend Yanga Tungwa, who's a speaker of Changlang Tangsa, commenced a Bible translation with the support of the Tangsa Baptist Churches Association. The TBCA and also one of the militant organisations, which I prefer not to name, had decided to adopt Champang, or perhaps its very close relative Shitu, they're almost the same, as the common language. And members of the Baptist Church in India are required to use Champang, especially the hymn book and Bible in church. So he originally proposed two tone marks, X for the low tone and F for the high tone in his variety. But in his Bible translation, he doesn't use those. He said one of the reasons he advanced for this was that he just couldn't actually work out what to write, which ones they were. And as you see there, there is some people expressed that his way of writing the word for children was problematic. So here's an example of his Bible. I've given you the New International Version translation of Luke 19, verses 1 to 5 on the left and his translation on the right. There are no tone marks there. It begins with Aching Ashina, at one time one at, actually. Jesuka, that Jesus, etc. So went to Jericho. I won't go any further into that. A development from this system was the Tangshang Naga Unified Orthography. I should have given the reference here, which is Bin Kam Lun and Win Owen 2018. Apologies for that. I can send that reference to anyone who wants it. Has its roots in Reverend Younger's system, and like Reverend Younger's system, employs double I for the mid-back unrounded vowel and U double dot for U for the high one. But it's changed the tone marks to use Z for the low tone, that is actually mid-falling in Shetu, but low-falling in Champang, and X for the high tone, and created another tone marker for some other varieties. It's not the case that all Tangsa languages have just the tones that are mentioned in that table, but it works for at least the ones that the creators were most familiar with. And here's an introduction to the primer that they produced in 2019. In this, I just made a note at the bottom that the Reverend Younger would write those first two words quite differently if he was writing them. And on the India side, people have not really taken up this system yet. Around 1990, Muishaung people broke away from the TBCA, Tangsa Baptist Churches Association, because they felt they couldn't adequately understand the word of God in a language they don't easily understand. Couldn't see the point of singing hymns that they didn't understand. So Rev Gam Win created his own orthography in which every tone is marked either Z, X or C or with a stop final, but he didn't mark tone on initial words of multisyllabic words, on initial syllables, sorry, of multisyllabic words, like with panpi, the word for a butterfly, because he didn't feel that that was sufficiently distinctive and everyone would understand what this word meant, because there were no other combinations of these two syllables that have meaning. At more or less the same time, some Joglei people converted from Baptist to Presbyterian following missionaries from Mizoram, and those missionaries helped them through the Reverend Ranjan Joglei to create an orthography that doesn't mark tone. And as one of the Joglei people explained, it's much easier to write than the other systems because you don't have to work out what the tones are. You don't have to know what they are. But it has consequently a lot of homography. So for example, here, this word nga, does this mean a buffalo or does it mean I? We don't know. Does come mean water or does come mean a pillar? We don't know from looking at it. In the context of Jesus healing at the pool of Bethesda, almost certainly this come means water, but this is not something that the word itself will tell you. I'm just going to very quickly go over these. This is other examples from individual subtribes. So this is Yang Ban Vang, where tones are marked by dots above or below the letters. And this is a sort of informal orthography created by Muklom people for singing hymns in church. This is for Muklom Baptist people. They are currently not permitted to use this. They have to sing their hymns in the Champang variety, which they don't by and large understand. But this was from a book entitled Gospel Songbook in Muklom-Havi Dialogue. In that part of Northeast India, what we call dialect is actually pronounced as dialogue. Okay, I just want to briefly, and I don't have a lot of time, of course, and prepared too much material, but this is just a moment, diverge to talking about getting the COVID-19 message into local languages. This is very up-to-date and current. And so thanks to the help of Craig Cornelius there, he has pointed out this website which is encouraging the production of a message in multiple languages. I just wanted to raise a couple of the issues involved in this, and this relates to writing for any of these languages, really. So first of all, not all these languages have agreed orthographies. Secondly, not all of them have literacy development in place that would help people to interpret these documents, and that's a real issue here. And in some cases, the desire to use a common language rather than a particular language of the variety of the village, community, subtribe might mean it's not understood by all. So for example, if it's decided, like with the kind of view that the Tangsa Baptist Churches Association has, that everyone should be reading Tangsa, reading Champang, then you'd translate the message into Champang, but it wouldn't be understood elsewhere. And there are issues with multiple characters and fonts. But nevertheless, with the help of Craig Cornelius, this translation done by Banwang Losu, who I believe is listening to the talk and following it right now. So Banwang made this translation earlier in the week, and working with Craig yesterday and this morning, we made this into this poster, which can now be shared widely, that says, basically, stop coronavirus, that's the heading. The first one says, wash your hands. The second one says, cough into your elbow. And the last one says, stay at home. You will notice that most of these examples have the same three symbols at the end, the last one with these two little marks above it, and that is the imperative particle in this language. Do this. And here's the same language, but in a simplified romanization. No tone marks here, but vowel length and nasalization marked. And this is so what together with Banwang, what we have, and with Craig's help, what we have created is 2 versions of this. One in the newly created script and one in the Romanized version of it. And here's a version in Gam Win's orthography for the Muishaung language. This was translated by Wancho Mossang, who I had hoped would join us this morning, but he wasn't sure when I told him about this. We tried also to create a version of this with the script that I'm about to introduce, but that wasn't actually possible. This page I won't go through very quickly, but this is just to compare the various Wancho versions and to show that down the bottom here with this example sentence, wash your hands, or hands wash imperative, as is the way the Wancho people in Gamhua Noknu village speak, just to show that we're doing good linguistic analysis along the way. So with the final time that's available with me, I want to talk about the creation of a particular script created by Mr. Lakhum Mossang, who is standing on the left in your picture. And that's me, of course, standing next to him, and Mr. Manpo and another whose name I have temporarily out of my head, his 2 most talented students who have been learning this script for a long time. This photo was taken in 2012 or 2013, and this has been going on as a handwritten activity for a long time. Now, what's really interesting about the script is that it includes 48 symbols for vowels and sounds considered by the scripts invented to be vowel-like. And these included a final ang and the syllabic nasal sounds. And these are listed first. So this is unusual for scripts in India, where normally if vowels and consonants are separate, you'll do all the consonants first and then the vowels. And normally the vowels are regarded in many Indian scripts as being kind of additions onto the consonants. But a very special feature of this script, a key design feature, is that for each vowel there are 4 symbols, which are generally unrelated to each other, corresponding to the 4 different tones. So the Tangsa languages generally have 4 different citation tones, 3 citation tones on open syllables and 1 on stopped syllables, but these are all written differently by Lakhum Mossang, as you'll see shortly. So we've named these tone 1, tone 2, tone 3 and tone 4 according to the tone numbers used in academic works like a couple of my publications and also Kellen Van Dam's thesis. And I should point out here that the font that has been created for this has recently been significantly improved and made better by Kellen. And Kellen and I spent a lot of time in the field in January working on this. So in the Mossang or Muishaung variety, tone 1 is low falling, tone 2 is mid-high falling, and tone 3 is mid-high, level or rising. So they can roughly be called low, middle and high if you want to. In the Rera variety, the Dipjoti studies, it's the exact opposite. Tone 1 is high, tone 2 is mid, tone 3 is low. So this creates an issue for applying this script to other varieties because you can't not mark tone with it. So as I point out, the form or realization of tones differs from variety to variety. But all I'm really going to talk about in the next 5 or so minutes that I'm allowed to on this script, maybe 10, is how it works for Muishaung. Now, this is the real test of whether things are going to work. And just to make sure, now there are some chat messages going on here. So welcome everybody. What I'm now going to do is to play for you the first video that I made of Lakhum Mossang explaining the script. Now, if you don't hear it very clearly, please tell me straight away, but I think and hope that it's going to work. So this is a video. Where is the thing gone? Yeah.
Tangsa, Tangshang Naga Language Common Script 73 Lingual 1992 2009 Part 1 Vowels 46 Lingual Reading System 1O 2O 3O 4O 5R 6R 7R 8R.
Okay, I hope everyone could hear that nicely. Didn't get a message from anyone, so I'm assuming you all could. And that is the way that Mr. Lakhum Mossang teaches his script. Each letter has its own number. Thank you, Carolyn, for telling me it was good. Each letter has its own number, and he teaches them in order. So you probably can't see the forms of the letters very clearly from that, but you'll see them more clearly on the next slide. Oops, no.
Tangsa.
There we go. And here I have given the first 8 letters of his system, which are the all vowels and the R vowels, long R vowels, and I've given them in his script. And then underneath that, in a kind of IPA system where the low tone, which is kind of low falling, is marked with a grave accent. The high tone, which is midish high and sometimes rising, is marked with an acute. The short tone with a glottal stop, and the mid-high falling tone with a circumflex. The IPA tone marking system doesn't allow you to give the fine-grained information about the tones, so I prefer to use category numbers and write in a descriptive system. So one is the low falling tone, 3 is the high, sometimes rising, 2 is the mid-high falling tone. And then in the system, Rev Gam Win system, which is where you use final Z, C, Q, and X for that. And so let's listen to it again. And what you can see from this is that there's no connection in form, really, between the 4 symbols for O and between the 4 symbols for R. You could not, having learned that this one here, hopefully you can see my cursor, anyway, the low R, the one which Rev Gam Win writes with AZ or A1, there's no feature of that it has in common really with the high tone R, which is the one in the column next to it. So these are completely different symbols. And this is a really important aspect of this script, that he views O on a low tone and O on a high tone as completely different. This is unique in the scripts in Northeast India that I'm familiar with. So here we can listen to this again. More clearly, I hope.
1O, 2O, 3O, 4O, 5R, 6R, 7R, 8R.
Okay, so
1.
Right. In fact, this is the full chart now of vowel symbols. So you have, oops, and there's an error here. I should have converted these V's to a schwa, a short centralish kind of vowel. That's my mistake. So where it says V, think kind of a schwa-like central, maybe a short like sound. But you can see that for each one of these vowels, there is 4 symbols. So for O, for A, for 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 I, for U, for U, for O, down here for and also for reasons that it's a little bit difficult to explain, for a particular diphthong, O, which we have written there with the back unrounded vowel symbol, but it might be a little more central than that and shorter than that. And he also includes 4 symbols for syllabic nasals, because they have words like mnaung. Mnaung is a very common word in the language meaning you singular. So, and that is a syllabic nasal. And a special symbol here on the left for final ang. Final ang is thought of as being different from final m and final n. And it's not clear to me why. And then there are 3 symbols, the ones which have these brackets in them, long, short, short, which are we're a little bit unclear exactly what they are. They are partly used for prosodic. And the list of consonants is much more straightforward and easy to learn. The only thing I'll point out here is that this language has dental stops and nasals that are fully contrastive with the alveolar. But the IPA only allows us to use the bridge symbol, which is, as you can see down on the bottom left-hand corner, which is very easily not seen and dropped off. And it would be really good, actually, if we had a completely separate symbol for that. Some years ago, at one of the conferences I attended, there was one researcher trying to propose something along these lines, and I'd be interested to know if any action has come in that direction. Okay, so up until very recently, everything that Lakhum Mossang has done with his script has been done by handwriting. And so here is a version of a Vihu song. This is the important traditional song of this community that Vong is writing her thesis on, and that Jürgen Schöpf, who was with us earlier, was involved in researching. And we'll come back to this example at the end of the seminar, so you can just memorize that piece of text now if you can, because he's going to read it for you and sing it later, but you won't be able to see it because he's looking at it. Well, I'm not serious about anybody actually memorizing it, but you can see how he has taken time to write the message about this. The actual song itself starts with line number 1 here, and even the fact of how he identifies lines in this song is significant. Notice that the first and second line have 2 lines each, and the third line has 3, and these lines are obviously rhyming because the end word in each case, well, not quite in the third case, but certainly in the case of the first 2, is the same, even if you can't read it. We transferred one very substantial long song in this this language into his script, and this is a small portion of the song, and I thought I had put a sound file for that there, but it seems I didn't attach it. Never mind, we don't need that because we'll have more time to talk about these things. So what's the current situation? So the first thing is making and improving the font. Now it looks pretty good at the moment, but there are still a couple of issues. It may be that some of the characters need to be slightly altered. So for example, can you all see where my cursor is at the moment? Can someone tell me by chat whether you can see whether the cursor is, where the cursor is? Yes, you can. Thank you. Okay, so where I've pointed the cursor to at the moment, I'll just get rid of this again. Where I've pointed the cursor to at the moment is one of the, is one of the E vowels written with E, when it is actually, it's a bit rememberable because it is sort of like a bit of an E in some ways, but I think it's just a tiny bit too horizontally broad. It's too wide. It needs to be a little bit thicker. So there are some issues with making the font beautiful, but the more important issue with this is to bring this into the Unicode. So we were able to put the coronavirus message that Banwang Losu translated into Wancho into the Wancho script that Banwang has created because Wancho is in Unicode, is accepted in Unicode. And that process is underway for the Lakhum script. So Kellen and I worked on this when we were in the field, and we produced a sort of draft proposal, which I'm not going to show you, or I'm happy to share it with anyone who'd really like to see it, but it's a very substantial document, very detailed explanation of what each symbol means. We had a meeting on the 27th of January in that really wonderful window in Northeast India between the difficulties of the Citizenship Amendment Act in December and the issues of coronavirus of the present. But at the end of January, it was the easiest place in the world to get around and to visit. And so we were able to organize a script development committee to talk about the use of this script more widely beyond simply the Muishaung subtribe. And here are some photos. Those of you with careful eyes and observations will notice at least one current and one former La Trobe University PhD student in this photo at work in their discussions. Here's a photo of the group. So you can see me on the bottom right wearing the traditional, well, not becoming traditional lungi of the Tangsa Naga people, or Naga more generally, I think, on the Myanmar side. I wear this in India particularly because in India, horizontal stripes have until recently been associated exclusively with female skirts. But on the Burma side, men are now wearing these. And I brought some as gifts to various people because the ones that they normally wear, that the men normally wear, which you can't see in this photo, but some of them up the back are wearing them, are actually based on Singapore or even Thai designs. The creator of the script, Mr. Lakhum Mossang, is in the middle. It's perfectly obvious to everyone there that the 27th of January in this part of the world is a cold time of year. Should also point out here Satum Ronrang, who has been the wonderful host for Deep Jyoti while he was in the field for a slightly longer time than was expected up until recently. And at the back here, Mr. Wanglung Mossang, who is our main consultant for the Moshang language. And I hoped he would be able to join us this morning, but I think he hasn't been able to. So to finish off, I'm going to let you see and hear Lakhum Mossang introducing and singing the Vihu song from his own manuscript of it. And I hope the sound and the picture works for everyone. Hold on.
Ara Tangsa nuk moal si arka rong lo ya moal nyo si cheng. Ara ngo sa vi si ngo sho. Lepan vo si lepan ya den ya rem ya nga Zarem na jadan na Zarem polos sito. Number one, hanlo chawaka tumatelo ave angon humatelo se viajum sama awang shu kevu ajum sama adang shu. He batang sa punay no kre kau ne mondan ngo atle jab jong yau chan ngo atle.
And there it is. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I'll stop. So, thank you, everyone. Shall we move now to any questions that anyone might want to have or any points that anyone might want to discuss?
Can I ask a question, Stephen?
Yes.
So you were talking earlier about the bridge underneath the T for the dental stop. And you said that someone was looking into that. Were you talking about for this situation, or were you talking about the IPA more generally?
I think more generally. So this, as I recall, I'm just trying to think of the person who was pushing this, was one of the talks, David Bradley might remember, was one of the talks at the conference in Myanmar in 2014, if I recall, making the point that this is basically this is one of very few consonant distinctions that are fully phonemic distinctions in these languages, which have to be expressed by diacritics rather than by another symbol. So the IPA has come up with a multitude of symbols for expressing a great many things, but not this one. And it is tricky to be writing it with, particularly as there are some fonts where the bridge comes out very small, a different symbol, and the IPA allows different symbols for the fricatives between the dental and the alveolar, so why not for the stops? I don't know whether that has developed in any direction, but it is something which I think would be very helpful. That is to have a distinct symbol so that we didn't have to, and it would be quite difficult to get back to it now, to transcribe things with this little bridge all the time. I have tended to use the fricative the theta symbol, rather than the T with the bridge, because it is just easier to process both as data entry and as reading. But I can't currently recall the name of the person who was presenting this, and I don't know whether Maria knows anything more about this, whether there would ever be any intention to do that. Right, we've got a question that's come.
Yeah, I'll just say that reform of the IPA is on the radar. Good.
Well, that's, so Maria, perhaps we can have a little conversation about this particular aspect of it one day. Hold on, I need my strong glasses. This. So Ria Bora Sonowal has asked the question, how was the script revived? Because history said it was eaten up by the ancestors. So we don't actually know what the script of the ancestors was like. Some of the scripts that have been created in Northeast India have been inspired, not, I think, this one. I haven't really talked with Lakhum Mossang deeply about what his inspiration, what his methodology of creating the script is. Lakhum Mossang is, as many very creative people are, rather eccentric and not always easy to ask him the questions that we want answers to. But I think he has been thinking about and working on this script for 30 years. He started it in 1990. As far as I know, it wasn't one of these cases of an inspired script, but a case of an inspired script would be the one that some other scripts that have been created in the Naga area. We could ask Banwang Losu to tell us a little more about how you go about thinking and creating a script, because he has actually created the one for Wancho, which I mentioned before. So there's no, but I guess to answer the question specifically, there's no particular feeling that the new script, which I spent the last 10 or 15 minutes talking about, is itself a recreation of the original script. And many people would say the story about the loss of that script is just a story, but it is present in a lot of places, and it predates, it predates people actually attempting to create scripts. So Dipchoti has asked the question, do we know if Lakhum is willing to add additional characters to represent the missing vowel phonemes of Rira? So Deep has established, beyond any doubt in my view, that in Rira, the variety that he was working on, which is spoken a very short distance away from where we were working, but is completely different in many ways, has a distinction in the front vowels between something like e and something like a. I don't know exactly the forms. Deep could tell us, but he doesn't have a good enough connection to pronounce them for us. I'm going to go back onto the share screen for a minute just to show you what we're talking about. Oh, I don't know why. Yes, there we go. So I just want to go back and show you what we're talking about. So if we go back to this slide here, what you will see is that there is an O and an O. So O on the top and O on the top left and O on the middle right-hand side. There is an E, but there is no corresponding E or A symbol. And Deep has established that this is a definite distinction, phonemic distinction in the Rera variety. So if this script is going to work for other varieties, it needs to have that ability to have that symbol in there, to have a symbol for that in there. And let's say this is a matter under negotiation. So Polach Nat, who was one of the first people that I did field work with in Northeast India, dating back, I think, to 2004, at basically this time of year, because we celebrated the Sankyan Festival, 13th to 15th of April at Naktong village near Titabor in that year, with relentless rain, if I recall. Is it relentlessly raining in Assam as we speak? It certainly was in 2004. So in regard to the sustained use of this script, how would I rate the possibility of younger generation of the community actually using it? Well, that's a really good question. So there is a desire by people in the Tangsa community to have a script that is uniquely theirs, rather than adopting the Roman script or other scripts. But learning it and actually using it and making it work is a different matter. One of the reasons why we want to get it included in Unicode is so that it becomes easier for younger people to use it in places like mobile phones. But there's this typical catch-22, because the Unicode committee wants it to be demonstrated that it's in use, and because it can't be currently used on mobile phones, therefore it's in less use than it would be. So it's a kind of a circular catch-22 situation. That being said, I'm getting a lot of support from individuals and a number of people associated with the whole Unicode process to get this included. Craig, who's attending this talk, and also Debbie Anderson has been extremely helpful and supportive on this. Will it be used, and to what extent will it be used? Who can say? But this actually raises the question of the extent to which any of these writing systems are actually going to be used in the long term. Because if we create, even if we create Roman-based orthographies for each one of these 80 different Tangsa varieties, that will all look a little different, as we saw in the example that I showed you of the I cannot carry them, then very small numbers of people will be reading each one. And it's not clear to me that most literate people won't in fact want to read other languages like English, Hindi, Assamese, and on the Burmese side, Burmese. It's not clear. So it is an interesting and important point. I think the fact that this script has been developed over 30 years and that it has this group of people who have been committed to it for such a long time is enough reason to give it support. And I think the fact of the script, the way that it was created, in particular the fact that each vowel has these 4 different symbols, what that says about the way that people feel about the language makes it something very worthwhile to support and be involved with. But will it be actively used in 50 years' time? Well, I won't be around to find out, but some of you young people might be.
Well, can I just add to this, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you know, regarding the question whether it will be actually used by the community or not, recently the government of India in its new education policy has emphasized on the use of mother tongue for each of the communities. So that it is still on the paper, and in India things it is really difficult to get things on actually being executed, implemented. So but there's a glimmer of hope that if people like you and if the community keep on working on this, developing the script, then maybe the government and then approach the government. There may be a possibility that there may be a serious intention of by the government to give some assistance to use it.
Yeah, well, we might hear, there is another question that's come, I think, from David Templeman about old words like na for I, na for in and ot, in and on, ru for horn, and various other ones. So these are clearly, I'll just answer that question quickly, these are clearly Sino-Tibetan languages, and the ancient roots of their history of some of these words are very obvious. But actually, Banwang Losu is probably the best person to talk about government support for script, because in the Wancho script, which is another, we saw the examples that Banwang had translated into the Wancho script of the coronavirus message earlier. And the Wancho script is now being taught in schools. I don't know, Banwang, if you can switch on your microphone and tell us a little bit about how that script is being supported. I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe the connection where Banwang is isn't good enough. Well, while we're waiting for Banwang possibly to come in, I would observe 2 things. The first is that it is a good thing that government in India and in so many parts of the world is committed to teaching mother tongue, but I think we need to examine and think about what that actually means. So when you say mother tongue, does it mean the actual variety that is spoken in the particular village, that is to say all the different diverse varieties, or does it mean that some kind of common language standardized variety will be what is taught as mother tongue? So there are some people in the Tangsa community who would say, well, the Shetjo variety is understood by many people. This is true in Nanyun in the northern part of Myanmar. It's not true everywhere in the Tangsa world, but it is true in some places. So why don't we just teach that to everyone? But it isn't actually the mother tongue of people who live, for example, in a Muishaung or a Ngaimong village, where this is effectively a different language. But you could set up an education program in Shetju, which has the Tangshang Naga Unified Orthography, materials are being produced in it. You could set that up, but then it wouldn't actually be the real mother tongue of everyone. And in some cases, it would be so different that people would barely understand it, if at all. If, on the other hand, we're going to have a mother tongue education system in every different variety, then that's already 80 times the task. So the logistics of it are enormous. And then there's the question of, you have mixed villages where multiple varieties are spoken. What do? So the issue of mother tongue education isn't completely straightforward. And one of the things I've had some discussions in the last few days with people in India about the coronavirus message and how putting it into an orthography that people aren't, or a script that people aren't accustomed to reading, isn't necessarily conveying any message, because people may look at it and say, well, I don't actually understand that, even though it is a representation of their language. So that maybe we are better to produce materials in video and spoken language, and maybe some of these languages won't ever develop the kind of written forms that, that we are so accustomed to in our language. I don't know. These are issues that are raised by this kind of discussion. I think has it gone 1 o'clock? I mean, not 1 o'clock. It's not 1 o'clock for any of you. Has it gone 2 o'clock in Melbourne, which would be 9:30 in India and 9 p.m. in California? Has it gone that, and 10:30 in Yangon? Have we passed that time? I think we have. I mean, if others want to ask questions, I can continue answering, but if people need to leave.
Stephen?
Yes.
I was wondering, the table that you showed, a lot of the symbols were so similar, like there was only one little nick that was different, and I was wondering, in handwriting, wouldn't that become a huge problem if you have like 3 symbols and, for instance, down there that looks like an H?
Yeah.
4 symbols and...
these ones here, yes, that is true of these ones. It isn't true basically for most of the symbols in the first 4 lines. This one here and this one here, so that's E and I are certainly very alike. The difference there is a tiny little bit of extra here, just where my arrow is.
Yeah.
It's certainly true that these are quite similar. Though, and I don't know why the creator of the script has done that, because the 4 different symbols for O and the 4 different symbols for R are completely distinct.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what is the inspiration behind that, but I think you are right. There are some issues involved in the learning of a script like this, and like there are probably around a dozen of Lakhum's long-term students who can write using this, and even he, when he reads it, as you could hear on that final video, doesn't always get it right, but partly that might be to do with his own handwriting. But yeah, I mean, it is an issue with the Wancho script up here. It's somewhat clearer because there are very few symbols here which are identical. One that I've got the arrow here is a short A, and this one is a long R. So there is a connection between those.
Yeah.
That distinction was not indicated in this way in the first version of the script. So that's why that was created. And so this reads, and Banwang will correct me if I'm wrong, but this line here, wash your hands, reads something like tak nu an, and each one of those symbols is different. So, but again, this is a different script, and creators do things in different ways. So, share. Good. Anything else that anyone would like to raise?
This is Craig. I'd like to say briefly, one of the advantages of moving toward a script that is standardized in the Unicode standard is that not only is it going to become available on mobile devices, but it works with all kinds of other services as well. So people can use it for texting, email. I'm a little prejudiced, but I'm happy when people start using their languages to build websites, and then things like Google search automatically work.
Yep.
And the nice thing about that is that they're just bit patterns, they're characters, and when people start using them to build content online, then the tools that work with content online, be it social media or search or other tools just work. When the font is available and when people have a way of typing it, then it becomes much more accessible to many people. And I believe that young people using it in social media and texting each other on the phones will be the primary drivers of whether a writing system is successful or not.
Yes, that's completely clear. And Craig, you and I have had many discussions about the issues of making all this work, and we are moving for a number of other scripts that I've been involved in studying for a long time, various Thai orthographies and scripts and so on. We are moving steadily towards things being better. I mean, somebody last year created a mobile phone keyboard that allows me to, and anyone who can install it, to write in the Thai home script on your mobile phone. I needed to have someone in India actually explain to me how to install it, but that was achieved. And so now if I feel minded, I can so do. It's going to take a while to get the script we've been talking about today working in that way, but I think, Banwang, that you can send text messages and certainly Facebook messages in your script right now today. Can't you? I don't know if I can get an answer from Banwang. Let me see if I can
Regarding Wancho, I heard from the man who designed the font, the Noto Sans font for Wancho, that he had developed a keyboard using Keyman.
Yes.
That they were actively using it within their community on laptops and desktops to do a lot of social media work in Wancho.
Yeah.
And the limitation is whether the font is available on a mobile device or not.
Yeah, so there are some issues with that. I'm just going to share my screen one more time and see if I can, oops, go to Facebook and find a recent message from Banwang where we have been talking about all this. Banwang has left, but just, this is something which, yeah, here we go. So you can see here, I'll just go up a tiny bit further, hopefully find, yeah. So here is the word coronavirus, stop coronavirus, translated into the Wancho script, and you can see that this is working in Facebook. And then I was able to have a discussion with him about why do you write the word corona with a nasal R rather than with the non-nasal R? And we were able to have that discussion. He said we pronounce it with a nasal ending. I don't know why, but they do. And so this Wancho language has this nasal distinction for the lower vowels, not the high ones, as far as I remember. So yeah, we are able to, and I think you can also do the same with a text message, but I haven't learned to do that yet because I just find it much easier to type on the laptop than on the mobile phone. But yes, that is indeed going on. So I don't want to keep this discussion going too long because it is after time. So thank you all for attending from all over the world. And we'll hope, but I'm not sure we'll ever get this particular group of people together again, but it was really nice to see you all. and chat. So those of you who need to leave can leave. If anybody wants to hang around and chat for a few minutes, as we would often do at the end of such a presentation, that is very welcome. Otherwise, I have to actually end the meeting before the recording starts to enact itself. And of course, I've forgotten to turn the recording off. So I'm going to have to remove all the questions probably from the recording. But anyway, yep. Thank you, everyone. So unless everyone has something they want to say, I'll say goodbye.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody, or good morning, everybody. Good,
Yes.
good day.
We're back to lunch in my case. Yes.
Midnight snack for me.
Yes.
Stephen, I just have one more comment for you.
Yeah.
One of the question about the shapes of the characters is interesting to me, because I've noticed when I'm reading scripts that I don't understand, I can't tell whether a feature of the writing is significant or not in distinguishing it from other characters. And I guess I have the feeling that will evolve over time as people discover that, oh, these two characters are too similar in shape. I would hope that people will develop fonts that either distinguish them, or maybe one of the characters will fall out of use.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And this reminds me of when I was first learning Thai nearly 30 years ago, and the difficulty of distinguishing certain of the characters in Thai. And I might just again bring those up so that we can have a look at an example of what I'm talking about. Because when you first look at these, you think, how on earth can people tell the difference between these two symbols? So hopefully we'll be able to find something that demonstrates this point. Okay, so look, for example, at the second and third one here. Kor kai, the egg, and kor kuat, the bottle. Looking at them, you can't see any difference at all. I don't know if you can, but if I make them a lot bigger, and keep finding them, what you eventually notice is that between the little circle and the beginning of the bit going down for the first one, it's straight and there's a little kink on the second one. And that is the thing that tells them apart. But until you know that, just looking at them, you would think they're exactly the same. Now, the kind of differences that we were looking at with Lakhum script are sometimes of that type. But this is an alphabetic system that has been in use for, or at least a script that has been in use for hundreds of years, and the people who read, write, and kind of encode this have no difficulty with that. So I don't think that any of the differences that were shown up in the script were significant enough that were troublesome enough that they couldn't be learned and usable, just as the distinction between those two is.
And in reading and writing, context is so important, and the context disambiguates that in many cases.
Yes,
like it does with spoken speech.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of time when people read, they read not single letters or even necessarily single words, but they read phrases, and consequently, once you get to the point where you're accustomed to reading a particular script, you will get those things. Someone is joining us. That's a bit interesting at this hour. Perhaps
maybe another meeting.
Another
meeting with the same ID.
Oh yes. Well, or is this the example of Zoom bombing that we've been warned about. Yeah, so but it's an interesting question, and I don't know the full answer to it, but I think you could really, I think that was your question, wasn't it, Caroline, about those symbols being very similar?
Yeah.
I think they're no more similar than the symbols I just showed you in Thai. And once you learn the distinctions, you can see them. And every writing system has letters that look quite similar at some point in their stories. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks for that question.